So the new Spider-Man No Way Home movie is coming out and I'm really excited about it, you know? I'm really excited about it. I'm like a kid on Christmas Eve, just waiting to open their Christmas present in the morning, except it's in a few days. Actually, I live in the Philippines, so it's like a few weeks away. I mean, come on, my entire channel is based on Spider-Man. He's my favorite superhero and he was a big part of my little webhead childhood. And on top of that, the trailer for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse came out a few weeks back. It's a good damn year to be a Spidey fan. So in honor of the two Spider-Verse movies, I wanted to make a video about a Spider-Verse game that I played and loved as a child. A beautiful game. A game that I really loved and blew my young webhead. Get it? Because that's my name? No, I'm not talking about Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions. I'm talking about its sequel, Spider-Man Edge of Time. Now, before you type that comment, I want all of you to put down your pitchforks and let me explain something. Yes, Spider-Man Edge of Time is a very controversial game, and yes, I know that there are a lot of fans that don't like the game very much. But the 9-year-old me didn't care. I was just happy to be playing a Spider-Man game, and that was enough to please my little tiny short attention span brain. So in order to make this video, I had to refresh my memory of the game and start up my Nintendo Wii and play the game again. And yes, I played the Wii version when I was young, and I play the Wii version now, but you can't blame me for only having a Wii when I was young. My family is poor, okay? In my case, I was lucky my family even got a console. So yeah, I played the Wii version, sue me. And as to why I play the Wii version now, I don't have any other console. So now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about the Spider-Verse game that almost destroyed the Spider-Verse, literally.
He's been siphoning Alchemax resources into converting the gateway in the old virtual unreality.
Now, the premise of the game is that you start the game playing as Miguel O'Hara, or Spider-Man 2099. And this was when the young me was introduced to a Spider-Man that wasn't Peter Parker. I really liked Spider-Man 2099 because of the game, and I still do like him. He's a very mature, very cool Spider-Man. The game does a very good job in showing his character. But going back, Spider-Man 2099 tries to stop Alchemax scientist Walker Sloan from starting Alchemax in the past and taking over the world, but fails. And because of that, the past is changed completely, with the Daily Bugle building being replaced with Alchemax. Spider-Man 2099 then gets a vision of Peter Parker's Spider-Man dying. So using the genes of Peter Parker that they have for some reason, he starts talking in the head of Peter Parker, and they can communicate now. Okay, sure. Talking to the past Peter Parker using his genes, okay? Sure, I mean, that makes sense. Oh, it doesn't, but that's okay. Then you start playing as Peter Parker, the original Spider-Man, and he gives chase to Eddie Brock as Anti-Venom, the good Venom. But he's currently being controlled by Walker Sloan via a subcutaneous control chip. Yes. That's the 3 from the game. I'm not making shit up. So they have a subcutaneous control chip in his head, and honestly, I'm fine with this narrative, okay? If you want him to turn evil again, fine. I mean, this doesn't really have to be too complicated. He's being controlled by a chip in his head by a scientist, but that's fine, I guess. There's worse things out there. So the classic Spider-Man completely ignores Miguel when he says that he will die if he follows Eddie Brock. And they kinda get into an argument of doing the right thing as Spider-Man. Basically, in short, Spider-Man will die if he tries to go and help Eddie Brock / Anti-Venom. And Spider-Man 2099 is telling him to leave so that he won't die. But if the classic Spider-Man does nothing, people will die, and Eddie Brock will turn evil, so...
With great power comes great responsibility.
I will say, if there's one thing that this game does right, it's the dynamic of these two Spider-Men and how their values and morals conflict with each other. One wants things done his way while the other wants things done another way. And that conflict should be the central part of this game, but it's overshadowed by everything else. Let me elaborate. The game is centered around the concept of quantum causality, which, to put it simply, it's changing things in the past to affect... The game is centered around the concept of quantum causality, which, to put it simply, is changing things in the past to affect the future. Now, I'm a big fan of time travel movies and shows. I mean, come on, I watch Doctor Who, so I'm used to a lot of plot holes in the time travel stories. But when the time travel plot is the central point of the story in a superhero game, it spells a recipe for disaster. Especially with the way Beanox handles it. So basically, in time travel logic, you wouldn't be able to change the past to affect the future normally, because if you change the past, it usually just makes an entirely different timeline instead of changing the future. But in this game, Miguel O'Hara says that because Walker went back in time, it created a wormhole which linked both their times, which is why quantum causality works, and which is why they can affect the past to change their future instead of creating a new timeline. Does that make sense? I try to explain it as best as possible. The writing of the time travel plot seemed to be the bare minimum, but they had a good concept on how time travel works, so overall the time travel and quantum causality narrative is perfectly fine with me. However, the story they told with it wasn't as good as it could have been. And when Peter Parker died, I thought that it was an interesting plot point, and I wanted to see how Miguel would handle it. But of course, time travel. Instead of doing anything interesting with the death of Spider-Man, the game devs just make Miguel save Peter Parker and heal him in the future like it was nothing.
Oh no! Anyway, last week...
Let me explain what's wrong with it. I'm perfectly fine with Spider-Man not dying. I believe that he should not die at this point. But you have to follow up on what your narrative was building up to, which was Spider-Man dying. They ruined everything they were building up to until that point. Spider-Man has to face death in order to save Eddie Brock and stop Walker. Because he's Spider-Man. He has this responsibility whether he likes it or not. Which is why I'm fine with Peter Parker walking into his own death. What I don't like is magically making him not dead by bringing him into the future and healing him in one of those pod things. Why is that even there? Oh, by the way, did I mention this all happens in the first hour of the game? Yeah, it does. So after a few days of deliberation, I decided to make my own story on what could have happened instead. So how about instead of having him saved by Spider-Man 2099 in such a half-assed way, we could instead have Spider-Man actually die and Miguel failing to save him, just like how he failed to stop Walker in the first place. So Spider-Man dies, and then because of his death, Miguel makes the decision to break his own rules and go against himself in order to go back in time and save Peter Parker from dying, risking the entire quantum thing. Yeah, I genuinely think that is a better narrative. It stays true to the story's promise of Spider-Man's death, and it also forces Spider-Man 2099 to go against his rules for a chance to save Peter Parker. Wouldn't that narrative be awesome? Yes, it's a kind of cheesy structure that's overused in time travel stories, but this gives the story so much more heart and soul, while also showing the audience the character of Miguel. You can even continue the story from there by having classic Spider-Man in the future to heal, and Spider-Man 2099 in the past to fight Anti-Venom. From there, the story continues as normal. But there is also another problem I have with the story, and it's this. Because Miguel saves Peter in the timeline, the past changes again, and then the evil CEO villain is revealed. Before we even get into the reveal, I think that this completely came out of nowhere. There wasn't any build-up to this character at all in the story. No one even mentioned it. When I was playing, I had no idea that the bad guy was the CEO. Or that there even was a villain. If you're going to make a dramatic reveal on who the villain is, you need to build up the character. Have Walker talk about him in a way that makes the CEO look like a threat. Or have Miguel mention the CEO as a scary guy that he never met. Or at least mention the CEO once. But no! I never even knew that there was an evil CEO until it was revealed. And don't even get me started on who they made CEO. Apparently, the CEO is not the Kingpin, not Doc Ock, or any other known Spider-Man villain. The CEO is Peter Parker. The future Peter Parker turns evil because all of his loved ones died, and now he's trying to fix that? Wait, what was the original point of the time travel? But this literally goes against everything Spider-Man is. This is not Peter Parker. Beanox literally ruined Peter Parker's character, all in the hopes of creating a cheap plot twist in the story. I'm sorry, but this is a disgrace to all Spider-Man across the multiverse. And remember the line, with great power comes great responsibility? Well, listen to this.
With great power comes great responsibility and great opportunity. And the only way to live up to all that responsibility is to use every opportunity to get all the power.
I mean, come on. It's one thing to change Peter Parker's selfless character and change him into a selfish CEO that wants to destroy the universe by saving his dead loved ones. But changing this sacred line? No, I'm sorry. You've crossed the line. Even when I was playing this as a kid, I didn't even like that reveal. I was mostly confused. And I still am! Personally, I think they should remove this storyline of an evil Peter Parker altogether, or at least put in a little more effort into the reveal by having it make sense. Beanox tried to make the you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain, but when I see this, I don't see a hero turned evil. Heck, I don't even see Peter Parker here. All I see is a plot convenient reveal that came out of nowhere. But there is one part of this story that I really adore, and I mean really adore. The part when Peter Parker finds out that Mary Jane dies because they were going to meet in Alchemax. So he decides to get into an argument with Miguel about saving Mary Jane even though it could destroy the timeline, and they get into another argument about what being Spider-Man really means. Then Peter Parker starts begging Miguel to save her because he's stuck in the future. So Miguel, fully knowing that saving her could destroy the timeline, decides to do it fully knowing the consequences, and also because he says that the world owes Spider-Man for everything.
Oh, you, Miguel. Big time. Shocking right you do. But, well, maybe this'll help even the score for everything the world owes you.
Which I really love. It shows that Miguel, even if he never agrees with Peter, he still has so much hidden respect for him as the original Spider-Man. And when he saves her, he has such a good moment with MJ where she says,
"Look, I just want to say thank you. You're as brave and unselfish as another guy who goes by the handle Spider-Man. You're a worthy successor to the name."
Thanks. I mean that.
oh, it's so good! But I really believe that it's the small and intimate moments in this game, coupled with really great characters and amazing voice acting, that really make this game better. So Spider-Man Edge of Time uses the same assets and controls from the previous game, Shattered Dimensions, and the gameplay is honestly perfectly fine. It does the job, and whenever I play the game, I do feel like Spider-Man, and I really love playing as Spider-Man 2099 because his fighting style is so good. It's awesome. The unlockable abilities are good, and I really like the level up method. Basically, you need to find these yellow spiders hidden around the map, and sometimes enemies will drop them, and you can use them to level up your stats and unlock new skills that you can use. Personally, I really like this because it rewards you for exploring every inch of the map, and whenever you find one, you feel so smart. It's like finding Easter eggs on Easter Sunday. You feel like Sherlock Holmes. Do people still do Easter? The web slinging and the wall crawling feels really good, and the free fall parts of Spider-Man 2099 are awesome. But I will say, they are a bit overused and a bit unrealistic, because keep in mind, this is all happening inside of a building. So for him to fall at that speed for that long makes me question the entire structure of the building. Sure, let's say that it's a futuristic building. That's why he can fall for so long, because futuristic buildings are skyscrapers now. But the thing is, he does it again in the past while saving Mary Jane. Is there like an underground portion of the building that I don't know about? So basically, I have no problem with the mechanics and controls of the game other than that. But that doesn't mean that the game has no problems. My only complaint in the game is that you fight the same kind of enemies regardless of the timeline, with the same damn objective, which is to get the key 90% of the time. 90% of the game you're picking up keys and unlocking doors with those keys from the enemies that you killed. Literally, what you do is go to a new area, find a locked door, then find a bunch of enemies that spawn out of nowhere and fight all of them until you get the key. And this formula goes on for the majority of the game, so obviously it would get repetitive. And what makes things worse is that the more you level up, the stronger the enemies get. So what's the point in leveling up then? When you level up your health, your stamina, or when you unlock a new attack, you feel like, oh, this is cool. Maybe the enemies will get easier, and maybe this will help me. And yeah, it does for the first few waves of enemies. But then they become as strong as you for some reason, and they just become meat bags. They just become meat bags. You hit them, and they don't die for like 10 punches. Why? Is it just me? Maybe it's just me, but I think that the health of the enemies are way too high. I think they should not take 10 punches from a super-powered human and still be able to stand up. I think that's fair, to be honest. Okay, I'm gonna stop myself before this becomes a rant, even though it's kinda a rant, but it's not really. Yeah, I'm gonna stop. Overall, the game isn't perfect, and yes, there are many flaws, but there are some good parts too. It's just that sometimes they are overshadowed by the bad. The story is okay with a few minor adjustments that I would make, i.e. CEO Parker. But to me, it's the small and intimate moments, the amazing characters, and the voice acting that really make this story salvageable. The gameplay is alright, the fighting and the skills are awesome, but the only problem is the amount of repetitive objectives in the game and the meat bag of enemies that they can take many punches, so many punches, and kicks. One way or another, the game will find a way to make you look for a key to open every locked door by fighting every tank of a man. So the game is an okay Spider-Man game. Overall, I'd rate it a 5.5 if I'm being nice. Maybe 6 if I'm being nice, but I just keep it at a 5 or a 5.5 to be honest. This game, it was ahead of its time, I'm gonna be honest. It was ahead of its time back in 2011, I think. But looking back at it, the game is just... yeah. One thing's for sure, the web slinging here is way better than the one in Marvel Avengers.